Welcome back to our mental health moment. And let's just take a deep breath real quick. We've been walking deep through this truth. The truth that our churches, our mosques, our synagogues, our temples, our sacred spaces sometimes taught us that bruises were blessings, that pain made us pure. But what happens when that belief system becomes internalized? What happens when you spend your life trying to be good enough to earn God's love, even when that love was already given? That, my beloved, is called religious trauma. Religious trauma syndrome, as a matter of fact. And it has a name. It is what it is. Religious trauma syndrome. Okay. So religious trauma is what happens when your spiritual environment causes psychological, emotional, or developmental harm. Okay. And it can be the result of constant fear of hell or damnation. It can be the result of teachings that demonize your body, your identity, or your choices. It could be the shaming of natural emotions like anger, grief, desire, lust, doubt. It could be enforced silence surrounding abuse or injustice, or conditional acceptance based on your ability to perform religious duties. It often shows up in people who've lived in rigid or high control religious environments. Ones where spiritual leaders were treated like gods, and questioning of said leaders was labeled as rebellion. What it is really is it's trauma wrapped in a robe. It's pain disguised as piety. And guess what, y'all? It lives inside of your body. Religious trauma lives inside of your body. Okay? And it shows up. And because many of us we are walking wounded. And we many times don't even know why we're bleeding. And some of these signs could be chronic guilt, even when you've not done anything wrong. It could be panic or anxiety when you go into sacred spaces. Obsessive religious rituals that you fear messing up. Sexual shame or fear of your own body. Difficulty trusting yourself or your intuition. Fear-based theology that makes God feel like he's angry and distant or even abusive. Flashbacks of nightmares related to religious teachings or punishments. It can also be showing up as emotional numbness or disassociation during prayer or worship. Some of you are probably like, I've experienced some of these things. And that's because these things aren't theoretical. These are your lived experiences. And this is what I want you to know. You are not crazy. You were and still live in a space of conditioning. Okay? I also want to say in Black communities, where religion is oftentimes our foundation, It's actually our culture. It's our inheritance. It can be so hard to name religious trauma. But why? Because we're taught that faith is survival, that questioning is betrayal, that church hurt isn't real because the church is just people. But when the pew becomes prison, healing is holy. We've inherited a gospel that sometimes centered obedience over authenticity. We called suffering sacred, but we're never taught how to self-regulate or seek support. And when we grow up just being told to just pray about it, whether it is depression, it's panic attacks, it's your molestation or your rape, it's your suicidal ideation, you internalize the idea that your very humanity is a sin. But healing reminds us one thing, that God is not afraid of your brokenness, and God is not holding a scorecard, and God is not glorified by your emotional exhaustion. Do y'all hear that? There's no glorification in you being exhaustion. And it's like we go into this performance loop, and that's one of the core tools I use in my therapeutic modality. And it helps to identify the performance loop itself. And what the performance loop is the internal cycle where people feel unworthy. So then people overcompensate through performance. Then people are burned out. Then people shame themselves. And then it repeats. The loop is born out of religious trauma that said, be perfect, don't question, don't feel, just serve. It's a loop of internalized oppression. And in Black communities, especially for Black women, this loop gets internalized or spiritualized as strength. But strength without softness is not salvation. It's a survival mechanism. And we're allowed to lay it down. We are allowed to put down this madness. Okay? And let's not just work to name the wound. Let's talk about healing. I want to talk about 3 entry points that I use with clients when we begin to reclaim ourselves from this religious trauma. Okay? Number 1, the nervous system mapping. Okay? Ask yourself, what teachings made my body feel small, scared, or ashamed? Where do I feel that now? Do I feel it in my chest? In my gut? In my shoulders? Use that body awareness to begin to identify some of the triggers and reconnect your spirit with your physical self. Okay? Number 2, script rewrite. Choose one core belief. Maybe something like, I'm not good unless I'm obedient. Then rewrite that in your own words. I am inherently worthy, and God delights in my freedom and full expression. In that way, we are reclaiming scripture when we reclaim our voice. Okay? 3, sacred affirmation practice. Every single day, repeat this out loud. Yes, out loud, preferably in a mirror. I was made in the image of a God who is not abusive. My faith is not a punishment. My healing is not rebellion. My softness is sacred. And say it until your body believes it. Okay? We have to also realize there are times that we need to seek support. Okay? So if there are times you find yourself crying during church but can't say why, if worship feels like a battlefield more than a balm is a salve that you put on to calm things down. If God feels more like a warden than a wellspring, it might be time for you to seek some support. And there are therapists like myself who are trained specifically to work with spiritual abuse and religious trauma, especially in Black and intersectional communities. Okay? You deserve to be able to process, you deserve to be able to be heard, and you deserve to heal without judgment. And no, you do not have to leave God to heal. But you do have to be willing to leave the version of God that harms you. Okay? I want to take a breath again, right here. I want you to say this with me. I am safe to question. I am sacred even when I rest. I am whole even if I am healing. And I want you to really remember that. Okay? We've made space for the real. Okay? We have honored the pain that came from pulpits. I think we should talk about what reclaiming power actually looks like. Because suffering is not your sacrifice. And your story doesn't end at the altar. Your story doesn't end at the altar. Jesus. That's heavy for me. Jesus. Okay. Your story doesn't end at the altar. That's heavy even for me. I'm sorry. I just had to really think through that. Okay. So, suffering became sacred in our theological systems. The reality of this space is for Black women. And we've been forced to make suffering look holy. I think there's a myth, and the myth is about the strong suffering saint. And it's the expectation that Black women must carry everyone's pain without breaking, without crying, without needing. I think this myth didn't start in the church. I think it started on the plantation. In the era of slavery, black women were stripped of their femininity and cast as beasts of burden, breeders, laborers, caretakers of their oppressors' children, and ultimately survivors of unspeakable violence. Our strength was not a virtue in the eyes of our slavers. It was a justification. It was a way to explain away the cruelty that we went through. If we were strong, then what they did to us didn't really hurt. Like they said, like even the gynecologist said, they don't feel pain like we do. If we were strong, then we did not need tenderness. We didn't need rest. We didn't need freedom. And tragically, that same mythology has crept its way into the church. and so then theological language turned that same place, that same suffering into sanctification, where we were taught weeping may endure for a night. But some of us never got to see the joy in the morning. You have to carry your cross. But no one questioned why the weight was always ours. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. That sentence feels like a life sentence, and it does not feel like it's an encouragement. Strength should never be a requirement for love. Suffering is not evidence of divine favor. Being chosen should not hurt in this way. It's a manipulation of divinity to justify exploitation. Period. Our foremothers like Katie Kanan and Renita Weems and Dolores Williams have taught us that Jesus did not die so black women could be martyrs for everyone else healing. In fact, Dr. Dolores Williams critiqued the entire idea of atonement theology, which is, the belief that someone must die in order for others to be saved, and question how can the exploitation of the innocent be the foundation of our liberation. I think that's a question that the black church has yet to fully answer. I once sat with a black woman who had been serving in church ministry for many more than 20 years. She was a caregiver to her aging mother, a prayer warrior for the congregation, and she was always the first to arrive and the last to leave any service. One day, she came into therapy and simply said, "I don't want to be strong today, but I don't think I'm allowed." How many of us has felt that way? How many of us have believed that our worth is tied to our capacity to endure? We have to break the myth of the strong saint. Naming this internalized mandate as inherited sacred labor, and this is resounds about the belief that I must always be doing in order to be worthy. I must always be giving in order to be safe. I must always be strong even if I am dying and struggling for breath on the inside. This is ancestral. This is encoded in us. This is what makes Black women the least likely to seek therapy, to take rest, to say no, and the most likely to carry the weight of entire families, entire ministries, and entire communities without so much as a thank you. It's not divine. It is violence. Psychological impact of this is chronic anxiety, which is masked as being prepared. It's depression, masked as burnout. It's a trauma response normalized as this is just how I am. It's panic attacks baptized as spiritual warfare. We're not crazy. We're not weak. But we are overburdened by a system that never intended for us to survive with softness. Let's shift the theology a little bit. Let's reread the text. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's an invitation, not a performance review. Be still and know that I am God. That's not about being inactive. That's about trust. It's about release. It's about a divine holding where God holds us. Even the Quran says, verily with the hardship comes ease. Not more hardship. Not glorified pain, but ease. So why is ease so unfamiliar to us? Because it was never preached from our pulpits. Because rest was called laziness. Because softness was called weakness. Because joy was only celebrated after the struggle. Not as a holy state of being in and of itself. I want to give you all a tool that I use with my clients. It's the sacred no. I want you to take one thing this week, one thing you normally say yes to out of obligation. And I want you to say no to it. And then I don't want you to explain it. I don't want you to apologize for it. I don't want you to overcompensate for it in other spaces. Just say no and let your no be sacred. Why? Because every no is a boundary. And every boundary is a declaration that your body is not a public altar for everyone else's everyone else's convenience. You're inconveniencing yourself for everybody else. I want to offer a reflective question here. What part of you still believes that being tired is the same as being faithful? And who is it that benefits from you staying exhausted? Because there is nothing in my life, in my body, that says that it's God that benefits from it. It's not God that's glorified in your being depleted. And I want to talk to the church pastors, your ministers, and the leaders who are listening to this. I want you to know I love you. I honor your call. I have the same call. But I need all of you to stop preaching endurance without preaching care. Stop telling people to serve like Martha without teaching them to rest like Mary. Stop celebrating sacrifice if you're not willing to carry any of the burden. I don't believe that Jesus came to create more martyrs. I believe he came to set the captives free. And some of us are still bound. Some of us are bound to our own pulpits. Being strong is not your identity, y'all. Being saved is not your punishment. Being faithful is not your cross to die on. Okay? You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to ask for help. You are allowed to leave spaces that only want you for your labor. You are not required to hurt in order to be holy. When we come back, we're going to move into the realm of scriptural interpretation and how the Bible and the Quran have been misused to manipulate believers into seeing pain as piety. But before we go deeper, let me say this. If this conversation is stirring something in you, please share this episode. It doesn't take you anything to share this episode. Send it to your sister. Send it to your mentor. Send it to your old prayer group. Let's work together to unlearn the myth of sacred suffering together as one in unity. I don't believe that we were ever meant to be strong by ourselves. Okay?